Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Everybody in the house here, in the coach house, and those in the virtual dress circle on live stream. Welcome to this, our theatre. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Green College's 19th, count them, 19th writer in residence, Colleen Murphy. Let's, first of all, though, recognize, as we always do, that this scene will play out, like all the other scenes around here, on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam people, implicating us in a drama in which we all still have roles to play, and whose character, whether tragical, comical, or any other, is still very much a work in progress. Colleen Murphy just arrived on a train. She is, in a way, a continuer of that great theatrical tradition of traveling by train. Have any of you seen The Dresser with Albert Finney? Yes. And Tom Courtenay, about one of those British repertory companies chugging round Great Britain? I don't know, was it the 1920s or something like that? There is the fabulous scene where the whole company is about to miss the train, and the actor-manager, played by Finney, gets to the bridge over the tracks and then bellows to the driver, "Stop that!" I can't do it, I've had laryngitis over Christmas. "Train!" The acoustics in here are good, aren't they? It's a lovely moment. Colleen can still hear the clank of the track. 5 days from Toronto, but here she is, in time to be part of a new production as part of the Push International Performance Festival. Let me get this right. I've got a note in my pocket somewhere. Find the right pocket. She's a co-writer on a play called Soldiers of Terror. Tomorrow. Soldiers of Tomorrow. Yes, exactly. Soldiers of Tomorrow. There's enough terror in the world without my adding to it. The primary author of this play, she tells me, is Itai Erdal, who is known as a lighting designer. Otherwise, it is a play about his time in the Israeli army. And it goes on at the Push Festival, and you can find out the details by going online. So that's, one good reason for Colleen to be here, and we're delighted that it sort of enables her to make good use of time that she will otherwise be spending around Green College. She's going to host 2 or 3 other events here, or possibly one of them over in Graham House. So just watch the Green List or our website for announcements about that. I did mention that she's the 19th of our writers in residence. The program was launched in 2000 by Lynn Cody, who came to Green College to work on the book that became Play the Monster Blind. We were all ready a couple of years ago or so to celebrate 20 years of the writer in residence program at Green College, which would have been, in the summer of 2020. So we didn't. Alison Waring, our 16th writer in residence, was going to come back to launch her new book, Moments of Glad Grace, which she launched instead on a Zoom from a pub in Stratford, Ontario. Before that shut down, we'd enjoyed the company of our 17th writer in residence, Daniel Canty, whose series under the title La Mise en Livre, the book as living form, has been now partly published in the latest annual report in Society magazine for the college, which you can find over there, along with a number of other literary offerings of some distinction. So do take one of these as a souvenir. And under COVID, we also were able to welcome Margaret Christakos as the first Meredith and Peter Quatermain poet in residence at Green College, and not incidentally the 18th writer in residence. And she put on a wonderful program, including events more or less theatrical with some of our resident members. So we haven't really let COVID stop any of this. Oh, and I should add that somewhere along the way there, though not under the Writer in Residence program, we also hosted Michelle Good, author of Five Little Indians. So here we go. But it's been a while since we had a playwright and screenwriter in these parts. The timing is good in that respect too, because this is the term of the year in which traditionally the Green College Players, our local theatrical troupe, put on a show. So look out for that too, likely to go up sometime in April, details to be decided. I think I've said quite enough by way of prologue. I'm not going to try to introduce Colleen's career or oeuvre. She will do that much more effectively and judiciously than I could. I would just like to say how very pleased we are that despite all environmental hazards, our plans for this residency are coming to fruition now. Your train arrived on time. Everything else is pretty much as we would wish it. And it's a great thrill for us, Colleen, to have you here, making this your stage this term. And I will now do as I said I would. I will yield the stage to you for the next hour or so. And then, of course, there is a reception over the way, so we can carry on talking in that green room too. Please welcome Colleen Murphy.
Thanks very much. Thank you so much, Mark, for inviting me. It was really nice 5 days on the train. I don't really want to talk about myself too much, but I'd like to talk about being a playwright. And so I'm going to read a lot of stuff that I've written about being a playwright, particularly for this Green College event. The great British playwright Edward Bond once said, quote, "Art is the close scrutiny of reality," unquote. The 21st century is an exciting time for playwrights to scrutinize reality through drama. There is much to dramatize because there is, and there always will be, that great red, bloody tangle of contradictions that fill each human heart: rage and love. I respectfully submit that all good plays are about love and rage. Look at the Oresteia. Talk about family dynamics on a collision course. In part one, Agamemnon, which is the play, Agamemnon, watch Clytemnestra's face when she hears Agamemnon is returning from war. Her husband, who sacrificed their precious daughter, Iphigenia, slit her throat so the winds would blow Agamemnon's ships to Troy. Her rage at Agamemnon is pitted against her love for her sacrificed daughter. But it's complicated because Agamemnon brings home a concubine, Cassandra, and Clytemnestra's been having a long affair with Aegisthus. So the Greeks teach us that meaningful drama is never about right versus wrong or good versus evil. It is about right versus right. It's an equal fight. It's a terrible kind of equal and a complicated kind of equal. If you watch Antigone rage against Creon, they are both right. She must bury her brother Polynices. She loves him, and she refuses to let his body rot in the streets. But if she buries him, Creon has to kill her, because there's a law forbidding the burial of Polynices because Polynices committed treason. So right versus right, even if it's wrong. Hamlet, the ghost of his father, appears to him and he gives him the task of killing his uncle. It is, I submit, an impossible task for a young person to achieve. and he's driven near crazy trying to accomplish it. And what if that ghost isn't even real? What if it's just a fever dream? When you step onto the stage as a playwright, you step into a world that has yet to be created. Your passport is your heart and your mind and all that is carried within those two major organs. You can come from any country, from any culture, from any trauma, from any paradise. You can bring your suitcase and your trunk filled with your experiential and political and personal and psychological and emotional worldview, your dramatic intentions, your family and your ancestors, your curiosity, and most importantly, your imagination. As a playwright, you people your country with three-dimensional characters. Characters who want something from each other, who demand something from each other. Characters that spring up from your response to your own life, or your response to the world around you, the world that you take in, the world you observe and feel, and the world you protest. You give these characters life by breathing into them their dreams and desires and belief. These characters, men, women, teenagers, kids, all ages, from all walks of life. They can be broken and brave. They can be blind and brave, or angry and aggressive, or greedy. They can be hopeless and heroic. You give them dreams, or you tear their eyes out. You give them a child, and then take it away. You give them power and let them destroy themselves, and then you give them insight and let them rebuild their lives. You give them their dignity by allowing them to fight for what they believe in, even if what they are fighting for is something stupid or terrible. You give them a level of autonomy. Then you design the tree, the house, a room, a mountain, or use an empty space to design a tree in the audience's imagination. You put a light up to shine in the characters' faces so the audience can be with them, watching them, feeling them, loving or hating them. The stage is a country, and you're all welcome. You are welcome to lay down your flags as I lay down mine. You're welcome to come and watch what goes on here, and if you do not want to stay, you can leave. And you may always return or not. There's no doors here, no windows. The stage has no borders, because the playwright, the actors, and the audience, we three meet together in a country called theater. And that landscape, that place, is the emotional experience of the play. For me, the emotional reality of the play that the audience experiences is the play. And the reality on stage is real because the audience makes it so. They start to believe what they're watching, and they start to believe it because the actors are absolutely convinced of it. And they are absolutely convinced of it because they find in the writing something real, something like a heart, a life, a death, a betrayal, someone to love, someone to hate, perhaps even kill, perhaps kill because they love them so outrageously. As a playwright, I go in through the actor. I write for actors. The most important thing I can do is to deliver the humanity of each and every character to the audience, which isn't always easy. Some characters are knuckleheads, some are nerve-wracking, and some are dangerous. Russell Smith once wrote in his Globe and Mail column that, and I quote, lawless, fantastic, amoral space inside the writer's minds, that space is the creator of poignant, messed up characters that do not reflect at all the way things should be in an ideal world, unquote. And that, my friends, is how it feels. Very, very messy. So messy that I often feel like a voice in the wilderness. I can shout from the forest, and you won't hear me on the highway as you are speeding along the highway in your cars, earbuds in your ears, music blaring. You won't hear me through the concrete of your condominium in Toronto, or your brick houses in Hamilton, or your bungalows in West Van. You won't hear me unless you stop the car on the side of the road for a minute. Maybe you have to take a leak or change a tire, or maybe you thought you saw a deer. And if you are standing by the ditch and there's a break in the traffic and it's quiet for a moment, just listen. And do you hear? Do you hear the moans of a homeless man breaking into a room where two older people are squabbling as they get ready for bed? Or do you hear the blistering accusations of a couple blaming each other for the loss of their child in a car accident? Or the haunted song of a lonely piper who finds himself in a town where adults are selling their children in exchange for instant gratification? Or the screams of a woman demanding her life as she fights off a brutal serial killer in a society who is indifferent to her murder. Or the anguished call for help from a young student who will kill himself because he was blindsided by an act of public violence. Or a young soldier's voice as he reads from a story he wrote, trying to make sense of what he did not do in the war. And a young girl's raving optimism that challenges him to keep reading. Or the howls of a starving polar bear as he climbs up the side of a cruise ship in the Arctic's Northwest Passage, and the frightened passengers pelting him with deck chairs. Rage and love. Love and rage. You hear it everywhere if you listen. And you don't have to stop at the side of the road and get out of your car. It's in your car with you. That's what being a playwright is like. It's always in the car with me. Edward Bond says, quote, what Shakespeare and the Greeks were able to do was radically question what it meant to be a human being. Well, what does it mean to create a human being for the stage? It means to create imperfect beings, flawed beings who struggle to do the right thing, even when the right thing is wrong. If you listen to Macbeth, tell Macduff about Duncan, his king, a man Macbeth loved, but slew with his own hand. Listen how he lies, yet he tells the truth of his feelings at the same time. And I quote, and I am no actor. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gashed stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. There the murderers steeped in the colors of their trade, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore. Who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to make love known? Unquote. And you see how the truth leaks out from the lie, and that's good drama. In the 21st century, we playwrights well, I speak for myself here. I, Playwright. We are surrounded by many possibilities for good drama. We have more than one war raging. We have social upheaval, the churn of political agitation, the anger at abuse, the rage at injustice. We're surrounded by instant pleasure, porn on our laptop, alcohol, drugs of every kind delivered to our door if we want. And at the same time, we are being consumed by corporate lust, trapped by a fear of environmental doom or viral contagion. We are broken by the disintegrating family, appalled at our own greed, scared of climate change, worried about inflation, worried about poverty, afraid of our own heartbreak, obsessed with our own youth, terrified of our own death. And we are constantly confronting ourselves and constantly negotiating with ourselves by taking or not taking responsibility for our actions. Rage and love, empathy and engagement. I try to create that experience. I explore and excavate what it means to be a human being. And what it means to be a human being is to be a complex being, messy, multi-dimensional, full of contradictions, just as Macbeth was the moment after he slaughters Duncan. The playwright Paula Vogel once said the best thing about being a playwright is you can talk to the dead. For me, the best thing about being a playwright is making the dead talk back. And we all have a lot of dead behind us. Theater is also a medium where we can confront our own death, how to die, and subsequently how to live, and subsequently how to love. Why? Why is theater this place? Because the scale of the stage, like right here, is a human scale. You, the audience, the listeners, you're the same size as the actors, so you're able to have a living, breathing relationship with them. For a couple hours, we breathe the same oxygen in real time. If an audience member's talk, the actor hears it. If an audience member laughs or cries, it will have direct and immediate effect on the atmosphere in the room and on the actor and on other members of the audience who are experiencing the play in whatever manner they are experiencing it. Here's what the great, and I say great, poet, Canadian-American poet Anne Carson has to say about rage. This is from the introduction for book Grief Lessons, 4 plays by Euripides. And I quote, "Why does tragedy exist? Because you're full of rage. Why are you full of rage? Because you're full of grief. Ask a headhunter why he cuts off human heads, and he'll say that rage impels him, and rage is born of grief. The act of severing and tossing away the victim's head enables him to throw away the anger of all his bereavement." Now, perhaps you think, this has nothing to do with me. And yet, you recall the day your wife, driving you to your mother's funeral, turned left instead of right at the intersection. And you had to scream at her so loud that other drivers turned to look. And when you tore off her head and threw it out the window, they nodded, changed gears, and drove away. Grief and rage. You need to contain that, to put a frame around it, where it can play itself out without you or your kin having to die. There is a theory that watching unbearable stories about people lost in grief and rage is good for you, that it cleansed you of your darkness. But do you want to go down to the pits of yourself all alone? No, not much. What if an actor can do it for you? Isn't that why they're called actors? They act for you. You sacrifice them to action. And this sacrifice is a mode of deepest intimacy with you and your own life. Within it, you watch yourself act out the present or possible organization of your nature. You can be aware of your own awareness of this nature, as you are never aware at the moment of experience. The actor, by reiterating you, sacrifices a moment of his or her own life in order to give you a story of yours. You know, you scratch hard enough, unquote, sorry. You scratch rage hard enough and you're going to find hurt. And you're going to find pain. And the only balm for that pain is love. We exist only when we love. And love often comes unexpectedly. And Carson writes this about love. And I share this with you because I think this brilliant poet has a dramatist's brain. Quote, "Pleasure and pain at once register upon the love, insomuch as the desirability of the love object derives in part from its lack. To whom is it lacking? To the lover, if we follow the trajectory of Eros, we constantly find it tracing out the same route. It moves from the lover towards the beloved, and then it ricochets back to the lover himself and the whole in him, unnoticed before." What is the subject, she asks, of most love poems? Not the beloved. It's the whole. It's the whole. The deep, crying hunger in all of us. The thing that makes us search through endless books, watch endless films, scroll through online dating sites, searching, ever searching. It's a hunger that demands that our heart take great risks. So, Romeo and Juliet, that love story turned out the way it did, not because of love, but because of hate. You take that young couple that fell in love across a crowded room and remove both sets of their parents, and you don't even have a tragic play. In fact, you barely have a play. See, Shakespeare understood that it's the combination of rage and love that makes for exciting drama. It's always the pull of the opposites, which I believe in some really great plays, it's also, I believe, in ourselves. Love and rage. Okay. What about my love and rage? How can I, as a playwright, continue to dramatize love and rage when theaters are becoming places of nervous restraint? Or a place that offers a nice balm after a hard day at work, an escape from stress, a place where social issues are presented as one-sided lectures with the conclusion pinned at the beginning, or a show-and-tell presentation to make the audience feel complicit or guilty, a place where lessons are taught, where journalism is offered up as a character, where facts are considered action, and where teaching moments are considered drama. The great British playwright Howard Barker says this about plays, and I quote, "Society will look at it and say, what is the use of that play? What does that play do? But it doesn't do anything for you. What do you go to the theater for? A massage? It's supposed to give you trouble." Unquote. So how can we, me, the playwright, give you trouble if audiences are being trained to fear trouble? Where is our place to rage and love when theaters, mainstream and not so mainstream, are being co-opted by the social work industries, the safety industries, and the cultural industries? I am not a social worker. My job is not to heal you, but I can, through my plays, offer you catharsis. My job is not to protect you, but to invite you on a roller coaster ride. I'll make sure you're strapped in tight, but I can't make sure you won't scream. And what is a cultural industry? A large room with rows and rows of playwrights banging out plays and getting paid? Are you kidding me? Getting paid? Workers in the cultural industries get paid more money to design a poster for a play than a playwright will ever get to write the damn play. I can't write plays full of rage and love if I'm afraid to affect audiences, if I must warn you ahead of time. You know, I think we've already trained audiences to be fearful of being disturbed or excited, emotionally moved or scared, upset or surprised. And have we done this in the name of protection? Who are we protecting? The playwright, the audiences? If audiences come to the theater afraid, how can they be open to radical ideas and feelings? How can the playwright invite them into a world that engages in love and rage if they're closed? And if I am afraid, well, geez, then I am finished as a playwright. And I am far from finished. I, personally, keep having to find the courage to protest, to be outrageous and to be dangerous, if only for a moment. Again, back to Edward Bond, and he says, quote, "If you can't face Hiroshima in the theater, you'll eventually end up in Hiroshima itself," unquote. In order to write, I leave my allegiances at the door. In order to write, I think with my heart and feel with my brain. In order to write, I put my hands in the toilet and my feet in the clouds. End of lecture. And now I'll read a little bit from my work. I even brought the books. I feel like a rug salesperson. Anyway, the first is a play that was just on at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa called The Breathing Hole. And I'll get to that in a moment. I have a little lead up to that. I was born in Rouyn-Noranda, Quebec, but I grew up in Manitowoc in northern Ontario. The weather there was cold and bright, lots of snow in the winter. My dad used to take my brother and I hunting and fishing all the time. And one of the most vivid feelings of my childhood was walking through the bush, feeling the forest floor under my feet, and the sounds and the birds and the bugs and the black flies, mosquitoes, birch and evergreen trees for miles and miles, and this incredible breadth of a world that I thought was the whole world. My dad would stop and point out fresh animal tracks, a moose or a fox or a bear. We'd fish for speckled trout, pickerel, perch. The bush was beautiful. But as I got a bit older, I saw that this mining town's existence was based on open pit mining at Chico Mine, where my dad worked. He had no education, so his job at the mine consisted of pouring bags of lime into an open tailings dam every day. Just before he turned 60, he got mad and quit in disgust. He moved to Prince Edward Island, and before he died, he planted 1,500 trees. I recently learned that Noranda Mines helped fund the 1973 Chilean coup d'etat in order to get their hands on Chilean mines again. Now, although I've spent most of my life living in downtown Toronto, in what I call the concrete jungle, I love the bush and the wild things, but I can't separate those love feelings from the angry feelings about the devastation wrought on nature. And that's why a number of years ago I began to write this extremely large play called The Breathing Hole. And I'm going to tell you the story of the play briefly because there's 10 or 11 or 12 characters in every scene, since it's not possible for me to read in a way that would be coherent to you. So this play touches on the climate emergency. It's the story of the life and death of a 500-year-old polar bear who takes the audience on a journey from 1535 to 2035. It was produced in December, I said, at National Arts Centre, a co-production between the Indigenous Theatre and the English Theatre. And the whole play, 500 years, takes place on near one breathing hole in the eastern portion of Nunavut, which is the traditional territorial homelands of the Netalik Inuit. You know, I was astounded when I read this. Nunavut takes up 20% of Canada's landmass and 60% of its coastline. And if it were a country on its own, Nunavut would be the 5th largest country in the world. And this play is written in 2 languages, English and I have to say Nuhilingmut. And it's performed in 2 languages. And that dialect, which comes from up the Johaven region, this is the most printed of the dialect that's ever been done. It's a part of language preservation. So, setting the scene, 1535. As they prepare meat from a freshly killed polar bear, Humatuk, a widowed elder, talks to Manilik about a dream that she had the night before. And she says, quote, "As I walked through my dream, everywhere I looked, the water was black. I didn't see any animal souls or human souls, only black water, but I did see something injured. A white creature struggling in black water, its forelegs reaching to me. I heard it call to me, not out loud, but in here. And in here, I heard it calling to me," unquote. So that same day, Humatuk sees a little polar bear cub floating on the ice. Initially against the wishes of the group, she adopts this one-eared polar bear cub and raises him to adulthood. She names him Angrak, which means the big man. Now, a few years later, the bear has become huge, and it's also become a very important part of this little community. It brings the people seals to eat and allows children to play around it. But when he finds a mate, he has to leave. It's heartbreaking for everyone to say goodbye to Angujuak. Humatuk tells him, quote, "In your travels across the snow and ice, always return to this place where you were brought up and loved for so long. And if you ever get lost or find yourself in difficulty, try to hear my voice on the wind. You'll be able to hear it. I will call your name, Angujuak. Go away now." And as he leaves, Humatuk and the shaman, Avignac, they look out to sea and they see a vision on the horizon. And at first they think it's a large narwhal or a strange winged creature. But what they are actually seeing in the turbulent mash of sea ice and sky is not a narwhal or a strange creature. It's the mast and sails of Sir John Franklin's ship, the HMS Erebus. And we hear the click, click, clack of 2 pairs of leather boots marching over the ice, transitioning us into the 19th century. 1845. We meet Sir John Franklin, James Holloway, second in command, and the rest of the crew. And they're searching for the Northwest Passage with their ships. Franklin and his men are quite bewildered when Angujoak arrives and offers them a seal. Because, of course, this is something he grew up doing, offering people seals. After some trepidation, they take the seal, and Angujoak and his mate go on their way. The crew then meet 2 Inuit hunters, and there's a great deal of misunderstanding and cross purposes, most of it very humorous, especially around penis size, which always seems to bring people together. Franklin, in full uniform, is brisk in his prayers, and he's determined to find Cathay, the jewel of the Orient. Now, a few years later, Franklin and his crew are starving to death. Again, they meet 2 Inuit hunters, and the hunters offer to help the crew to find fish. But Franklin, trapped in the rigid protocol of the Royal Navy, refuses help. He screams at Angujoak while his men slaughter and feast on Angujoak's mate. And as the men head back to their ships, which are frozen in the ice, by the way, Franklin looks out to sea, and there he thinks he sees the blinking lanterns of Cathay. But what Franklin thinks is Cathay is actually a 40,000-ton, 400-foot-tall drilling platform, circumpolar oil, rising out of the waters of the Northwest Passage, and we hear the loud drone punctuated by the pumping sound, transitioning us into the 21st century. So here we are. It is 2031, which is essentially around the corner. Angujoak, lonely, his fur yellow and ragged with age, sniffs around his old breathing hole, searching for the long-dead Humatuk. Then the sounds of people frighten him away, and he leaves just as a group of entrepreneurs arrive. They are making plans to build a green cruise ship, assessing the current disintegration of the Arctic to determine how best to monetize the situation for future tourism. Led by Matson Day and a number of very wealthy business people, they are up there enjoying a pork trip while actors wearing realistic polar bear costumes do a photo shoot for an investor's brochure. An Inuk biologist arrives. She's tracking samples from tracks from a very old bear who has never been tagged. Concerned that the group are too close to the perimeter fence of circumpolar oil, an Inuk security guard arrives and asks to see everyone's ID. This does not sit well with the group, but they comply. After he leaves, the actors in bear costumes return, but suddenly Angujoak shows up and attacks one of the entrepreneurs, blinding him. A few years later, despite a huge oil spill in the region, Matson and the group are on the maiden voyage of the green ship, the Aurora Borealis. And decked out in their finest, they celebrate the launch and ring in 2035. It is during the singing of Auld Lang Syne that Angujoak, desperately thin and starving, attempts to climb onto the deck. There are screams, bottles are thrown at him, then plates of food, deck chairs, and finally the captain of the ship orders the crew to drop a Zodiac on the bear. And as the ship pulls away, Angujoak, gasping for breath, trying to hold up his head, but has no strength left. Struggling for life, he takes his last breath and dies. His head falls forward, and for a brief moment he floats and then slips under the water. This is the exact same vision Humatuk foresaw in her dream 500 years before. That's the whole play. The polar bears, by the way, are huge puppets. And this polar bear is the leading character of the play because he carries the emotional line to the audience. Okay, one more monologue. So I don't know if anybody saw this play, because this play premiered here in Vancouver. The Society for the Destitute presents Titus Buffonius. It premiered in 2017, and then it went on to Edmonton, where it won another slew of awards. But it hasn't been done in Toronto yet. So I just want to read. Oh, so these are 5 Buffon clowns. For those who don't know, Buffon clowning came out of the gutters of Paris when the poor, the disabled, the sick, on one day a year they could come out and make fun of the king, and they weren't going to get killed for it. So Buffon, which I love, and I'm working on another one, is a kind of form of protest. So this group gets a $500 grant to put on a play and they choose Titus Andronicus, and they put on this play, and I tell you, it's a great deal of fun, but it's also a finger up. A finger up in the sense that when I was commissioned to write an adaptation of Titus Andronicus, which I hate, hate the play, don't understand it, makes no sense to me. Did Shakespeare even write it? I couldn't find my way in for 3 years, and it was commissioned from here in Vancouver. And then I found my way in, and my way in was, why are they killing children? What? And that was my way in emotionally to the play. So this is Sob. He's sort of the leader of the gang. He was the one he's playing Titus, and he goes in and out of playing Titus and being himself. And this is somewhere in the middle of the play. And yeah, I'll just read it. I've never read it before. Peter Anderson, where are you? Anyway. Those disgusting, wank-faced toads and their slobbering genitalia. What is happening? We've become an empire of sorrow, a nation of rage, of fear, a herd of pornographic warriors in the age of unreason. Did I fight for this degradation? Did I fight for my daughter to be raped and mutilated? Did I fight for my sons to be murdered without proof they committed a crime? Did I fight for the government run by a man whose anus is bigger than his brain? Yeah, actually I did. I chose him. Why? What did I really want? Was I blind, crazy? Was I too modest, too proud? Did I want to be liked more than I wanted to be wise? Why didn't I take the fucking crown when it was offered to me? But oh no, instead of taking the crown, I killed my own son. I killed my own son as I would swat a fly. And I fear, oh boy, I fear the souls of the children I murdered will come to me in the night. Look, I've tried to be fair. Fair. Oh, give me a fucking break. We got nothing at the Society of the Destitute except paper plates, plastic knives, and hardly any books. In one of the richest countries in the world, we got nothing but someone else's charity, and I don't want charity. I want meaning. Because I gave. I thought I was giving myself to help build a better future, but I was just filling someone else's treasure chest to support someone else's corruption, to feed someone else's power. It's always someone else's power. Kings, prime ministers, presidents, dictators, billionaires, gods. Tamara was right. Fuck the gods. Revenge is the only god we will worship from now on. Right Lavinia? Because revenge is the sugar in my blood, the acid in my dirty shame. It's the ache inside my burnt-out heart, the screaming infant in my brain. Sorrow is the stink between my sheets, the smelly inflammation of my cage. It's the free coffee I toss back in your face, the mushroom pizza I shit on in my rage. Okay, thank you.
So we've got time for people to come back after that and address your remarks straight to the playwright in residence, in any genre. Please just go ahead. Yes, you said, wait for the mic and then on the live stream.
So you mentioned that you spent 3 years with this particular play and Titus Andronicus, and you needed a way in. And then you mentioned dead children, and you'd found a way in. Can you explain a little bit further that dead children, is that in reference to something more specific?
Sometimes, it takes a long time for me to write a play. And so I need to have a spark or a emotional something to make you write the play, to make you commit to the time. Because it's, shitty money, right? So it's not like you're working by the hour. So in Titus Andronicus, what outraged me, when I actually had read the play a number of times, where here was a guy and other people killing their own children in the name of honor. And that made me lose my mind, because in the play, these characters worry about that. They worry that the dead children will come back and haunt them. And the last image in the play is not words, but after they've spewed ketchup everywhere and had their big death scene, as the lights go down, the lights come up on the walls of the stage, and you see all these little dead babies.
I just wanted to say that I did get an image of one of our current Canadian crises, which has sort of come to the surface after over 150 years, and I felt that there is a connection there, and I wanted to know from you if there's certainly that had anything to do with it.
Well, I think the outrage, as any society, the outrage of killing children, I don't care what the reason is, because there is no reason, across the boards is outrageous, and one must protest, as we are starting to do, against it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I don't want you to think, oh, and this is really serious. It's actually very funny. But funny and serious, tragedy and comedy, they're always connected by the cheek. You never see the masks by themselves. So, which I like. Yes.
Hi, thank you. Very inspiring. A little frightening. The breathing hole. What was the process by which you wrote this? You were a co-playwright, is that correct?
No, I was the playwright. So here's the trajectory.
Okay.
I started writing it in 2013. I thought it would be an opera. Well, that was a silly thought. And then I figured, no, it's a play. So I got a grant and I wrote it. And Stratford the dramaturg at Stratford, he asks playwrights in the country, what do you got? You got anything interesting? And so I said, well, I got this thing about polar bear, but it's not really for Stratford because it's a bear. Anyway, he said, oh, let's see it. And he really liked the outline and commissioned me, and we were away. And then we got Renata Arluck came on as a director, and then we went up north to Iqaluit, and I got into trouble. I seemed to get into trouble because I'd made some mistakes in the research, which of course I did. That's why I went up to Iqaluit in the first place. So that was really interesting. And then we did the play at Stratford, which is a huge success. It was held over, sold out. But there was difficulty in the community, the Inuit community, because they felt, and I think rightfully so, that there were First Nations actors playing Inuit characters. And this was upsetting. So this is the turning point for me where I went, okay, wait a second. I am going to have the whole play translated into the dialect, then translated back into English, but not my English, the English that would come out of the dialect. And then we would work on this together, and we brought in Siobhan, who is a cultural consultant. And we worked for 3 years. And the translator lived in San Francisco. And so we went and worked and worked and worked and worked. And then when we got to do it in Ottawa, it was the first time we got to see the language. Well, it's fantastic, right? Because you're there. You are there, you're in the rhythm of the language. You know what people are saying, because we had surtitles. And it was grand. But it was a long process. And I would say, that's almost 10 years of work. But it's in the book, in both languages. And I always say, what is written cannot be unwritten. Come on, ask me a question.
The play you did in Edmonton that was boycotted, and I just have thoughts about how you think that play would fare now in this new climate.
I have no idea. The last time it was done was in the Akwesasne Reserve in Ontario, near Cornwall. Was done by a group of Mohawk women. And the women played all the parts. So it was really interesting. I think it was done in Cold Lake in Alberta, but that's the last time. So I don't know how it would fare in this climate.
I'm dying to see that play.
It's called Pig Girl. And I got in a lot of trouble for that. Partly through casting, because I had initially written the play. Okay, just take a second here. I don't know what I was searching for at that time, but I was quite angry about how women always get killed, disappear. There's always violence done to them. And I was looking, I'm going to look for something that's the most extreme, right? So I was researching Picton. And I thought, holy moly, right? So when I first did the play, it was all white characters. But I talked to Yvette Nolan. I don't know if you know her. She's fantastic, Métis, playwright, director, everything. And we were talking, and she said, in having this woman white, you again disappear the indigenous women. So she helped me turn the white character into a Métis character. But I didn't cast an indigenous person in the premiere. Right? I did cast a mixed race person, but they were white and Chinese. And so there was the big problem there. And, I don't defend my work. I mean, people had a lot of reactions to the violence. It was done in Montreal, There was no violence. They did it all standing, looking out, talking, like in a row. You can do the play any way you want, right? But yeah, I don't know how it would fare now.
Yeah, it's a British it's a British Columbia story, right? That's why, and it has never been done here, right?
No, we tried to get it done. We tried to get it done, and there was a lot of different kinds of upset. Certainly from the Coalition of Missing and Murdered Women, there was upset of some of the people on the board of the theater. And then, you know, it's so interesting because then there was upset from a coalition of sex workers. They were upset because they felt that, now I'm speaking what I heard from them, okay? They felt that Picton wasn't choosing race, that he took anybody. And they felt that they were being dismissed. But you know, as a playwright, like this is one thing I've learned, you cannot win. You can only make the drama. Everybody's reaction to the drama is valid. You know, that's why I don't defend the work. Like, if you want to walk out, I'm happy if you walk out. My job is to write the story and offer the experience. But as an audience member, you don't have to like it, and you can leave, or you can not leave. Like that's the exchange, right?
Yeah.
And it's an equal exchange.
Yeah, it's a conversation.
Yeah, it is.
And your job is to get it started.
Yeah. I mean, look, you know me, I don't do message plays. I have no message to send anybody. I just want to offer emotional experience to the people who pay the money to take the time to come into the world of this particular play. I want them to go out, either they've laughed, they've cried, they're going to kill me, or they're upset, or they're fired up, but I don't want them to be bored. Then I'm a big fat failure.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it, being a playwright.
Thank you.
Thank you for that encompassing presentation. What you talked about the sacrifices of the actor. What is the greatest sacrifice of the playwright?
Wow, that is a great question. What is the sacrifice of the playwright? I think, okay, Tennessee Williams was once asked, are your plays autobiographical? This was in the Paris Review in the 60s. And his answer was, no, they're not autobiographical, but they are emotionally autobiographical. And so I think, and I can only speak for myself, I put all myself in my plays. But no one will ever find me. You know what I mean? So that's the sacrifice, right? Thank you very much.
That'll be the first round of applause. Thank you very much, Colleen, from the gutters of Paris to the gutters of Green College, and ready to make trouble. You didn't give us a sneak preview yet of the play that you're going to be working on while you're here.
Should I?
Well, or you
2
could
seconds?
say, or you could, if you could.
All right, quickly.
Thank you.
The play I'm working on here is another climate emergency play, and it's called Growing Up Dead. And it's about how in this world, the world I'm creating, young people with what is hovering over them die before they are dead. And it's an exploration using a 10-year-old girl in the late 21st century with her mom and her dad and a family friend. And it's, I guess you would line it up with The December Man, Pig Girl. It's that kind of a play for people. And it's not funny. Maybe it is, I don't know.
So that's what Colleen is mainly here for. So we're only going to take so much of her time. That said, if you're a student or anyone else living at Green College and you've got writing projects, or you know other people who have, Colleen will be available some of the time each week, scheduled to be arranged once she's got into her stride here with all the other things she's going to do, to work with local writers. And if there's an appetite for it, then one of the hosted events that we've put in the schedule for Colleen later in the term would be a stage for some of that writing too. Just before I ask you to join me in another round of applause for Colleen Murphy, let me give you a heads up for one of our events next week, particularly if you think of yourself as a Green College Tuesday person, because next week is one of those weeks when Tuesday at Green College is on a Wednesday. Don't come next Tuesday. I don't think anything is happening here at 5 o'clock next Tuesday, unless you want to meditate. But come on Wednesday to hear our John Grace Memorial Holocaust historian in residence. Her name is Natalia Ivchik. She is a Ukrainian historian of the Holocaust. She arrived in Vancouver, just 2 or 3 months ago. She's living at the college and has affiliations with other UBC units. You'll see a description of her talk already at the website. It's entitled A Bridge Over the Chasm of Oblivion, Creating Spaces of Holocaust Remembrance in Modern-Day Ukraine. It's about public history, historical consciousness, how to make and maintain those memories. This is work that she and the NGO with which she's associated had been doing before the current catastrophe in Ukraine, and of course it leads on to reflections about how this kind of traumatic experience once again will be remembered in space as well as in time. So that should be another very troubling presentation next Wednesday, but in the safe and relatively comfortable surroundings of the Coach House with a chance to decompress afterwards in pleasant conversation. Natalia Ivchik, 5 o'clock, not next Tuesday, next Wednesday. Let people know about that, please. And in the meantime, as the curtain goes down and up again, another round of applause, please, for Colleen.